income is always underreported in these businesses because the guys take cash. I mean, it's just, if you're running a $4 or $5 million a year scrapyard, you're scraping some amount of cash out of that business from some guy somewhere in some commodity, because that's just how these guys are.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pentz. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
Hey, welcome to Small Business Mentor. We have Sam
Yeah.
Bacon, right? Something like that.
That's
yeah,
it. That's
Green
right.
Circle Demolition. Thank you, by the way, for dressing up for the podcast. I appreciate that.
That's right, buddy. Just for you, man. This is,
All right, so tell me about your breakfast. What was it?
not a highbrow. No, yeah, I was just saying, I was having breakfast with a guy that he's 40, going to turn 41, and has just, I mean, he's a scrappy guy, but I mean, he's failed a lot, like just a lot of failure in his early
In business, right?
Yeah. I mean, he messed around. I mean, I sort of ran into him through YPO, but he was in the demo business for a little while, failed. He was in sort of the commercial real estate, kind of bad timing, failed. Did an original landscape business that kind of didn't work out, and then figured it out and got it. But he's just,
Did he start him or buy him?
Both. He's failed his way up somehow. And the guy. I got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, he's stuck with it, and I mean, he
got into YPO, right?
He did, yeah. And it was interesting because I was taking some notes during breakfast because I guess when you fail frequently and whatever, like you start to kind of step back and look at like, all right, well, what statistically, what's going on here, right? So he was sort of rattling off like, everybody talks about half of small businesses failing in 5 years, but you know that 70% fail in 10 years? And I was like, I did not know that. That's even higher. He's like, yeah. Most people are failing. And I was like, yeah, that's true.
So he probably has some battle scars he can teach people, right?
Yeah, no. And you know what? He's he's running a successful landscape company now that's good. I think he got figured out that the value is in the recurring rev model. He's sort of cut out all the construction stuff. He's buying companies right. He's sort of, he's doing the right stuff now, and I'm.
Well, that should be inspiring to our search brothers.
Yeah. He did over a decade of pretty consistent failing before he kind of found something that he could.
I think I need to have this guy on the pod. That sounds perfect.
Yeah, no, he'd be good. Adopted, really interesting, like whole startup story. And he's a very he's a very transparent guy, right. So he'd be somebody worth talking to.
All right. So sure. Tell us about the demo and scrapyard business. How'd you get into this? What is it? How do you make money out of this?
So the demo business is a very tough to exit kind of income producing milk the cow deal, right? I mean, there's no real recurring element to it outside of your customer base, which is relationships and low pricing and all those stuff. So everybody wants to differentiate on service, on whatever, but it's like at the end of the day, it's tough. The companies that are out there buying other companies are not particularly excited about, non-recurring rev models with big contract fluctuations, with large receivable balances, with expensive to fund growth. It's just like everything private equity seems to look for. This sort of checks the other side of that.
And it's all like what you're taking down some commercial thing.
Commercial industrial buildings is all we're doing. And if like you or a friend, we tear your house down for you just so your son could come play on the excavator or whatever. But there's no real money in the residential side of the business. That's just a nothing deal really for us. So there's that piece. We got started in that, kind of doing more like interior selective demos. So if you go to a strip center and you want to put a restaurant in and there used to be a nail salon, we'd tear that out for you, right? So we started there. Then we started doing asbestos abatement. That's a high margin part of the business. It's obviously they're not putting out new asbestos, so that sort of there's less and less of that business to do every year. Ostensibly, although I'll tell you, when I got into that business 10 years ago, people we're saying, oh, there's 10 to 15 years of this left. And I just left the conference, middle of this year. And they're like, oh, there's 10 to 15 years of this left. So it's like, I don't think anybody really knows. So we're going to keep doing it until it runs out. And there's other environmental stuff, like sort of once you become an environmental contractor, that's a very broad umbrella, right? Like, oh, do you do mold? It's like, well, I'm certified to do mold. We don't do a lot of it. Hey, will you haul away this contaminated soil? Yeah, we can do that. We're already there. So it's like that umbrella of stuff being a environmental remediation, all those kind of things, that can mean a lot of different things. And there's sort of generalist players that do a lot of stuff. And there's guys that just do mold in Florida, right? There's a lot of mold in Florida. That's all they do. And so there's a lot of niche kind of environmental stuff that goes on out there.
So is it like once you get the insurance for doing all this crap, you might as well just
pretty
do
much.
it all?
Then you go take some classes, get a license, depending on the state, and then you are an environmental contractor. There's a long tail in the workers' comp piece. So you're taking real risk on, sort of, you've seen the mesothelioma commercials and all like that. I mean, that stuff's real. And nobody really knows how much asbestos you got to breathe to get asbestosis or some of this other stuff. So there's those risks. But, I will tell you the bulk of the stuff that we're remediating is stuff that contains between 1% and 5% asbestos by content. So you kind of got to work in a fairly well ventilated area to have 1% to 5% be something that's really the concentrations of the actual fibers themselves are in the materials that are still remaining to be abated are pretty low. So it's not there. The reason that we make a lot of money on it is because there's a lot of perceived risk because of exactly what you're saying. But the real physical risk today, you use sort of your protective measures, and you can mitigate a lot of it. You can get pretty comfortable with it.
We took out a old coal, I guess it was originally a coal-fired furnace in a house in 1910 house in DC. And when they came in and said, "Oh, there's asbestos," it was like this team. It was like ET, like the guys who came to get ET.
Yeah, everybody's in spacesuits. Everybody, yeah.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah. So, and again, that's why you probably paid $15,000 for them to do that. Yeah. It didn't cost them. It cost them $6,000, and there's a little bit of but the insurance, the pollution insurance, all that stuff is, I don't know where your insurance costs have gone, but ours have, the last 3.5 years, ours have almost doubled. And, we joined a captive, which we could talk about. That's something that if you're in a higher risk business and you're pretty good at managing your risk, that's something
Let's put a pin in that. I'd like to talk about that because you're joining a captive that other people got together or something. This
is a group captive. There's a lot of different I'm not an expert on it by any means. But there's some different structures for different size companies. You got to have a certain amount of premium dollars to make it make sense. But when it does, it is a long-term plan. You need to plan on being in it a minimum of 5, really more like 10 years. But at the end of the day, if the captive manages their risk well, you manage your risk well, starting in year 5, you're getting premium dollars back that you put in because you're self-insuring up to a certain level, essentially. So it's a nice way for you as a business owner to sort of put away, a few $100,000 to a few $1 million a year that has the potential to come back to you half a decade later. And it's something you're paying for anyway. So you're deducting it 100% on the front end, and then you're bringing it back at capital gains rates 5 to 7 years later when those policy periods are closed out.
But you're taking the risk of the collective captive, right? So what if you have a bunch of dumbasses not running?
Yeah. So the thing with the captive is, they can only obviously, so you're out, you have a sort of first dollar risk you take, right? Hey, I'm going to, they underwrite you based on how an insurance company always underwrites you with hey, how much risk do we see based on your loss history and all this different stuff. But at the end of the day, if your captive has what they call a frequency problem, where there's just tons and tons of small claims that are happening all the time, it can blow the whole deal up. If you have a severity problem that's not terrible, that's sort of why you have insurance, right? A couple of big claims a year, you eat into your reinsurance layer, everybody chips in a few bucks and you kind of move on. But if you start having, just tons and tons of claims, it can become, it can become something, and it's expensive. There's big collateral requirements, you need to be committed to doing it for the, medium term. But yeah, if you're in a high risk business, they're group captives out there. It's something that you should definitely explore.
I was thinking about it because I was talking to this guy about cyber insurance, like a bunch of stuff, people getting money stolen from them. And like basically
Absolutely.
all the policies now have all these riders that like if you go into them, basically you're not going to be able to make a claim.
Right. Yeah.
So like he was educating me on that. And I was like, oh, maybe we should all just do a captive and like make it, but you got to have the captive, right? The captive's got to like crawl up everyone's ass and make sure they're doing stuff right. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, once you pull the skirt up on the insurance stuff, I mean, one out of every or $3 ish is just going to like fees and brokers. And I mean, it is a fee heavy game, I mean, AIG gets paid 5% to put their name on the page. That's the running carrier. They just is 5%. You want us to put our name on that piece of paper? It's going to be 5%. You're like, man, that's a lot of money.
That's what a federal guarantee does for you, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. All right. So tell us about, the other part of your business, right, is
so the demo and the scrap business, that they sort of go hand in hand, like anywhere from 10% in a bad year to 20% in a good year of our gross revenue on the demo side comes from scrap. So I come to tear down your building and, 20% of the stuff in there is actually paying me money, copper, aluminum, steel. The biggest chunk of that for us is steel because that's the heaviest, largest building components that we're typically recycling. But so, I sort of learned the scrap business through the demo business. And I actually officed in a scrap yard when I started the demo business and worked some there and like learned a lot more about the scrap business. And, the scrap business is there's sort of three models that I see people kind of running. There's the broker model where it's just asset light. You're just in there. You've got relationships in Asia and you're aggregating material. It's high volume, low margin brokerage, right? Like just we're shipping loads to Taiwan. They're taking apart motors by hand. I can pay you a little bit more than you're getting here and I'm going to make a small spread. So those guys are just literally sitting by a phone. They may have a small warehouse somewhere where they consolidate stuff, but it's, so that's sort of the one exporter broker model. Then you have the processors. These guys are manufacturers in reverse. They're trying to sell pure chemistry to end users. So they take a car and they break that car down through their shredders and their non-ferrous recovery processes. And they end up with, steel, aluminum, brass, copper, all these different elements. And they're trying, the purer you get that, the higher the dollar you get. So you're getting a premium for breaking down a product into the purest chemical element you can break it down into. So there's guys that do that. And then there's guys that are kind of like us that are mid-level aggregators. So I sort of think about us as kind of Amazon in reverse. Amazon sort of buys wholesale, sells retail, and we do the opposite. We buy retail and sell wholesale. So we're getting a premium for aggregating and upgrading materials from the general public and sort of consumers. We're moving into the processing, and this is something that I didn't really want to do because I think the trap a lot of people fall into in the scrap business is they try to do a lot of different things well. If you want to be a good broker, it's hard to be a good broker, a good processor, and a good sort of customer service driven mid-level aggregator of scrap at the yard level. And there's a lot of guys that try to do it all. And I was sort of trying not to, but there's been a ton of consolidation in the scrap business, especially in the Southeast. And we're just running out of end markets to sell our shreddable material to at a spread that makes sense for us. So we're having to take it in-house and vertically integrate to sort of maintain margins and support our business. It's been an interesting shift. I mean, when I got into this business in 2015, we opened our first scrap yard. We had about 6 people that were competing for our ferrous, our 6-2 magnet scrap. And now we've got 2. There's just been a lot of guys that have gotten rolled up, and it was a good, money was cheap. Some guys came out of California and, they own about 85% of the Georgia market now. They bought the biggest recycler in Georgia and then proceeded to buy sort of like the second biggest and the third big. I mean, they've sort of bought almost everyone. And they control this market. I mean, it's like almost at like an antitrust level locally, where you're like, good Lord.
So now you're starting to do it yourself though?
We're installing the equipment now. And I mean, it's not something that I really want to do. But we were making about a $50 or $60 spread on our ferrous materials. And now we're making, some months less than 20. And we just can't operate at that margin. And, it's really these big guys have come and kind of made it a one price market is what they've done. They're paying me, anywhere from $15 to $20 a ton more than they're paying a guy that brings them one lawnmower. So I'm just not getting any premium for volume with those guys anymore, because they don't need it. They don't care. And they've already got the units and they sort of control the market. So it pushes you. The whole game with recycling is you're trying to, it's all about what you paid for the material. Right. And then after that, it's like, hey, what do I know that I can do with this material, either with, people or equipment that the guy I bought it from can't do. Right. So like if I buy a car from you and I shred it, you can't do that. Right. So it's like I'm getting the premium for liberating these different materials that are all combined into one car. And you can sort of look at that up and down the line of like what equipment and what processes and what knowledge do I have to upgrade a material to a higher level to sell it. And, you want to be selling as pure a product as you can possibly sell.
And in the end, like I sit next to you at our little masterminds and you've got like a commodities screen up, right? Like, so you're basically like a commodities trader, half a commodities trader, half a.
So the thing that's hard for us is yes, you do want to kind of have visibility into the markets and kind of know where things are going. So, but we really try to match our buy and our sell monthly. So if I buy 2,000-3,000 tons, I want to try to sell 2,000 or 3,000 tons. I'm not speculating a lot. Now we have the material, right? We own it, and so we have a physical hedge, in the margin that we have in the material itself. And so if I think that the war in Ukraine is gonna settle up next month, and there's gonna be a big demand for rebar in Europe as a result of that, maybe I hold back 20 or 30% of my package and try to see if the market spikes next month. But it's like those are all sort of global speculative. I mean, and the metals market is a global market. There's stuff. And it used to be things happened and it moved markets. Now people say things like, hey, we think that China's holding, a third more copper inventories than they're reporting. And it's like, well, does anybody know that? And it's like, nope, but somebody said it and the copper market dropped, so there's a lot of this sort of speculative information that kind of drives these markets. I mean, you probably saw this, but the LME just basically, canceled, 2 days worth of trades in the nickel market because they didn't like the guys. They didn't like the guys in China got throat squeezed, right? I mean, they basically couldn't come up with the physical material to meet the contract. And I mean, they were just like, well, we're just, things got a little crazy. We're canceling those trades. And it's like, well, that's not really, and I think JP Morgan just lost, or one of those big commodities houses just lost a big lawsuit on that.
Oh, really? I'm following the lawsuit. I knew that.
Trying to force them to come through and pay the other side of the contract,
Wow. All right. So talk about scrapyards. So one of the things I liked about them is like no one wants a scrapyard in their town, right? So you've got this like regulatory barrier, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, so the zoning piece is really your biggest barrier to entry in the game, right? So our expansion has been buying either salvage yards that are doing auto recycling, like a pull apart type deal, because they have the zoning and it's grandfathered in, or buying an existing scrapyard because it is almost there's two reasons that I think it doesn't make sense to go through the headache of trying to greenfield. One is what you're talking about, sort of the regulatory NIMBYism, all that kind of stuff. But the other thing is, unless you just have the hottest corner and there's just no service and you've got to get the customers in there. And for the multiples that these businesses trade at, you can be making money the day that the ownership transfers if you pay for it, or you can spend all this money trying to market and do whatever and hope, and it's an absolute ghost town for the first 6 months. And you should have just bought somebody, because it's not, these things don't trade at 10 times earnings. These are 3 to 5 times earnings businesses, and they're businesses where there's not an owner of a small scrapyard that does not steal from himself. So, there's always materials that come in that seem to not go out, right? There, where it's like, oh, well, he's selling all his electric motors cash. Well, I'm not going to pay him for that. So there's, income is always underreported in these businesses because the guys take cash. I mean, it's just, if you're running a $4 or $5 million a year scrapyard, you're scraping some amount of cash out of that business from some guy somewhere in some commodity, because that's just how these guys are. And you know, it's like, and I tell them every time, look, you've already been paid for that. I can't pay you for that. You got paid for that. You cheated the government. You did whatever. That's fine. But I'm not paying you for it, you know?
Well, not to mention, they probably all have environmental problems, right?
Yeah, they do. But you know, so we're in that business, right? So it's like, we've got a pretty good hold on what it takes to get comfortable around those issues. But yes, they do. Almost without fail. I don't think we've ever bought one that doesn't.
Man,
we didn't have to do.
I mean, what, like, is there? It just sounds like a great deal. Like, there's not a ton of risk. I mean, you can run it. I guess there's operational risk, but like
there is.
But like, you got a built-in set of customers. They're pretty diverse. They're not making new ones. I mean, it sounds like a pretty good deal.
It's you know, there are businesses that are harder and easier, right? Like our contracting business is a hard business. I mean, we're running 100 plus people in 4 different states, and they're, you know, broken English and lots of coordination. And, you know, the recycling, I mean, I got 6 or 8 people a yard. They come to the same place every day, deal with mostly the same customers every day, put the stuff in the same box. And I mean, it's a Burger King, you know, it's comparing a Burger King to doing last mile distribution or something, you know. I mean, it's just so much easier. There's so many fewer moving parts, and you know, it's just neat. It's you don't make as much money. There's not as much margin in easy businesses, but man, I mean, it's easier just in almost every way, you know. And I don't know if I know you're looking at that metal business, some of the other stuff, and I'll tell you, I think, you know, having that sort of everybody comes to the same place every day, mostly doing the same thing, sort of measuring production. And I mean, it's just
we closed 2 weeks ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm 10% owner of a metal fab facility in Waltham, Mass. So
there you go.
Yeah. The guys operating it, they are drinking for the fire hose right now. So
are they?
Great. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a lot. It is a lot. I mean, this is like 40-year-old business, and like, you know, everything's on paper, and they're just trying to figure out which end is up. So they're doing well though. They're good operators. So you were the guy that got me like first LP investing, right? Limited partner investing. So tell me what you're seeing in that market now.
The bulk of, like, over half of the stuff that I've done has been real estate related stuff, and that's been you know, I mean, the sort of country clubbed up real estate stuff, the syndicated real estate stuff, I mean, it's just very little in the last 12 months. I mean, you know, we're trying to put what money we can back to work in our businesses, like you, I'm sure. And when that bucket kind of becomes, you know, full, for me, the LP stuff is twofold. One, I'm not a public markets guy. I don't feel like I'm smart enough. I don't know that game. I'm not an insider in anything having to do with a public company, right? I mean, I'm a guy that would just be buying like indexes or whatever. Like I don't, you know, for me, I like stuff that's like, hey, look, we're going to go buy this trailer park in Huntsville, Alabama. And I know the guys that are doing it. I know the guys that are operating it. I sort of, you know, and the thing that I really like about it for me personally, and is just, you're putting money to sleep. Like, you're not getting that money back. It's gone. Like you know, and it may come back to you 5 years later. It may just be a dividend, but like, public stuff is too liquid. I don't want to be able to go out and buy a car or I want it gone. I want it away from my greedy hands that might spend it on something. And the alternative stuff is a liquid, and you get a little bit of a premium for it being a liquid, but you also don't blow it on stuff.
So I would assume you're still seeing LP deals. You're just not doing them, right?
Yeah. So my sort of minimum return profile is like, if I don't think I can get 15% sort of IRR on a deal, I just don't think it's worth, you know, I'll just sit on the cash. What's happened is money's become, you know, equity's become a lot more valuable in every sense, and you're getting a lower return on it because they can't leverage it in the same way. So you know, it's this weird, you know, intersection of, hey, your dollars are worth a lot more, except the problem is we can't promote them in the same way, and you're actually going to get a lower return for putting this money at risk. And I just haven't seen much that's.
Yeah, I just feel like the private markets don't correct in any kind of near time frame. So like you're looking
Yeah.
at
Well, they
you're
don't
looking
have
at
to,
like an
right?
apartment REIT, and it's down now. It's not down now, but it was down 50%, and you're still seeing
Yeah.
the same freaking terms from a year before on a multifamily, right?
Yeah. And the stuff that I see constantly that I think is interesting is, hey, we're buying this at a discount to replacement. We're buying this at, 50% of what it would cost. It's like, yeah, it's great, but I feel like that's sort of the office argument I see out there all the time is, hey, if you had to build this today, it costs $200 a foot and we're getting it for 40. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't have any income and nobody like, well, who cares? Like, what are you going to do with a building that's, it's a weird, it feels salesy, is the new, sort of, so
Like the PE
but
guys got a line from headquarters, and they just use that all over and over.
yeah,
and over
exactly.
again,
Well,
right?
and I think I do still believe there's just a ton of money sitting around waiting
For some.
Yeah, waiting for some kind of distress that just hasn't really materialized.
So you're not doing that trailer park or whatever at
We
this point.
we haven't bought. I mean, the group that I do that with, they haven't bought one asset this year. They tied up two. I mean, and last year in 2022, I think they bought 9. In 23, they bought 0. They did a land deal we did, which I think was a good deal outside of Texas. That was just like they found a good basis on some land when they were hunting around for something else, and they're going to flip that next year to a home builder. So I mean, they're still doing some opportunistic stuff out there, but it's just, I mean, they're off 90%, 95% from where they were a year ago from a deal. And I've got a guy that does the multifamily sort of capital market stuff in Atlanta for CBRE. I mean, they're off 90%. All those people that live on transactions, commercial real estate transactions, I mean, they're just, they're dying, I mean,
and I saw it's like the largest delivery of multifamily across the country in like 40 years over the next 12 months. I was just like,
I'll tell you the one interesting deal that I wish I'd gotten in on. These guys out of Birmingham, and I can't remember the name of the group. I will remember it at some point during this call. But anyway, they're going to these multifamily guys and basically saying, look, we see a lot of demand for temporary corporate housing, like these traveling nurses, these whatever, and we want to take 10% of your brand new product that's coming online, and we're going to pay you an above market rent split, and we're going to do sort of the management of filling these units up with shorter term tenants. And most of those multifamily guys pro forma lease ups in the 90s. Well, this kind of fills that last gap to get them over the edge. And the guy that's out there doing the marketing of this product, the only thing he's in these units for is furniture and advertising. Like it's all rev share. So it's just like, it's just like the Regis WeWork, where WeWork went out and signed all these leases and Regis just does a rev share. These guys are doing the same thing on temporary corporate housing with all this glut of new multifamily that's coming online. And they're having some real success with it, man. I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, because it's an asset zero business essentially outside of some FF&E costs and whatever I really thought that was an interesting way to kind of,
I like that. Yeah. So that,
I know I did too.
That
was one that I wish I'd gotten in on earlier, and had an opportunity to do, because I think that's going to be a smart.
So then how do you manage liquidity then if you're putting all your money into private, like untappable?
Well, I mean, we have a certain amount of money that we got to keep for our core businesses, the core capital stuff.
Got to keep your 2 months capital because of our.
Oh yeah. We actually do a little bit more than that because I just am, conservative on. I think that's, I think I like my people more than 60 days worth of paying them. But and then we got the stuff that we sort of allocate for the following year that we think we're going to be able to put to work within our business. This year we bought a bunch of equipment for the recycling business. Stuff like that. And then, you've got excess dollars that, if you're profitable and you kind of know that on a monthly, quarterly basis, I might hit, you've got the calls, you kind of see where. But one thing that's really tough about the demo space and all these contracting businesses, and hopefully your fat business, you've got a better sort of revenue cycle management than we do. But I mean, our day sales outstanding is over 60, like not including retainage always. So if we bill, if we have some good months and bill a few $1 million a month, I mean, the cost of running this business is financing receivables. I mean, we're a bank that provides.
What did you say DSO was?
60. It's over 60 days. Yeah. So I mean, it's for us, kind of every day is worth about 80 grand of cash flow. It's a big, I mean, if we can just get that down to 50, we have an extra $800,000 that showed up in cash from 60, so it's a real, managing your cash. As Greg likes to say, you only get to run out of it once. That's a real, it's a real thing. And honestly, as you grow, that's the biggest cost of growth is just, hey, can I fund this next job, out of current cash flow? We're about to borrow money because we're making money.
Yeah, it's that chart out of Simple Numbers where he's got like profitability level and like day sale outstanding. It shows you how long it takes you to get your money out, and it starts getting up.
Exactly.
If you're 10%, you got like 60 days plus. It's like 2 years. Yeah, in the metal fab, it's better. I mean, you get some up front.
You're getting some deposits, some midterm,
because there's like equipment and stuff, like materials and stuff like that.
Well, you're making a product, right? I mean, you're selling a product, like an installment sale kind of thing.
Yeah, and then you can kind of play with like how much of the product you're going to get, and because you got like volume purchasing you want to do, and the client's going to maybe do it for multiple times, so you are holding some inventory potentially, but like there's a little game there, and we're new, so we're going to be working on optimizing that. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I should be, instead of going into the markets, I should be plowing my money into more metal fab facilities. Or something like that.
I mean, look, if you're disciplined and don't spend your money, and the opportunities will come, and that's for us. It's like if you told me 10 years ago, we'd have 4 scrap yards and all this other stuff going on. It's to your point, you kind of set a bar, and then the bar becomes meaningless, 3 to 4 years later, if you keep pushing and, you just kind of move it all the time, and it's like everybody's got a number when they're 25.
Yeah, so I asked Sam, like, what, like I just had a discussion with my YPO forum mates, and it was like, what's your number, right? Like, what's this mythical number that you'd like sell everything and walk away? And my point is always like, every time I get close to it, like the number goes up. So it's like there is no number, right?
Yeah, dude. There's a guy in my forum that makes $120 million a year. His company makes $120 million a year. And the guy works harder than anybody I know. Like if I called him 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, he'd be looking at something having to do with his. I mean, there is no, I mean,
it can't quiet the brain, right?
Yeah, it's just how the guy's built, man. I mean, there's no, I mean, if you wrote him a check for whatever, he'd be doing something else the following day, I mean, it wouldn't be like, oh, well, now I'll go to the beach. It'd just be like, no, now I'm just going to work on something else for 80 hours a week,
Yeah, I was just talking to a buddy who exited. He's in EO with me, and he exited a couple years ago in my industry. And like, he's back operating some company, and he's got like all these investments. And like one of his points on the number too was like, yeah, you're going to get a number, and then you're still going to go make money because that's who you are. That's what you do, right? You're not going to stop. If you're a shark, you can't stop swimming, right? So
that's right. Yeah, that's it.
But then you got to think, like, eventually, like, what's all the money for? So if you are a young person, go seek out Sam's kids and definitely seek a marriage, because Sam's not spending all the money.
It's all girls, so I don't think any of them are going to want to be in anything I'm in. So
you don't think your girls are going to want to do scrap yards?
I don't think they're going to want to do scrap and demo. I don't think that's going to be there. I doubt it. Not based on what I'm seeing today.
So what are you seeing, like, economy wise? Like what? I mean, I saw the Fed. Like looks like we're going right back up. Like they're going to cut rates next year, and I feel like there's still tons of cash around. And I made a little meme on Twitter of Jerome Powell saying, "Am I long monkey JPEGs? You're damn right." So I feel like we're about to go into this reacceleration. What's your take?
It's interesting. So we just did our annual sort of planning, and I always kind of try to pull just sort of like, hey, here's the macro stuff that's happening, and some of the things that I thought were interesting. Just for sort of our contracting side of our business was manufacturing year over year spend was up 72%.
72%.
72%.
That was where did you get that? Was that
in the US? So ISRI publishes all these stats. I can send it to you, but it's the scrap metal recyclers. They post a bunch of sort of industry stats on, because they're looking at like who's consuming raw materials, right? And construction. And if you look at steel mills, construction's like almost half of the material they're producing. So they track that stuff pretty close. But overall construction spending was up 5% year over year. This year for us was a pretty flat year. A lot of that is because of the markets that we play in. And, I feel pretty fortunate that we're in the Southeast. I think it's a good place to be. I think there's generally good population growth, all those kind of things. And we're projecting for, next year, hopefully we're flat to up a little bit. And I think it's interesting because the scrap business, I could tell you right now, if you give me sort of a rough band of where commodity prices are going to fall, I mean, our operating costs are almost 100% fixed. I mean, the only thing we don't know is what are we selling this stuff for next month? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I'm selling. I can lock a load of copper in today at 388. I could wait 2 days later, it could be 350. Same material, same cost, same everything I've got in it. And, it's off 30 cents. And so, that business, I can tell you how much we're going to spend internally next year on our overhead and everything. And I can come up with a really narrow band. On the demo side, we make all our money on 4 or 5 jobs a year, 4 or 5 really good jobs. We hit a really good, big demo job, an insurance cleanup job or whatever. And, that'll be 30% of our net income for the year. It is a very cowboy. It is. I mean, it's a cowboy business, man, 100%. I mean, it's just, you gotta buckle up because you don't know what you're getting, it's not, there's nothing consistent about it.
I complain about my business, but it's like that.
Yeah.
My business is nice, big, steady contracts, right? But
I know
when you lose one, it sucks because you go.
And I'll tell you what, there's different slices of the demo business. There's guys like us that are kind of like middle players. I mean, some of the bigger guys get some of these bigger utility level contracts, stuff like that. They have a lot more visibility. They can tell you a lot better than I can, sort of what they look like 12 months from now. But, from a macro standpoint, I mean, I don't know. I mean, everybody seems to have, on the private side, what I will tell you is when I look at our contracting business, we used to ask, when is the job going to start? That was really important to us because we want to schedule, we want to do ever. Now the question that we're asking is, where are you getting your money? Is this public? Are these public dollars? Is this a tax credit deal? Do you have, because if it's that kind of stuff, it's probably going to go, hey, am I trying to go get a 65% loan from Synovus to build a multifamily deal? I'm not going to spend a lot of time pricing that job because, it is much more important now, like, is this capitalized than do you want to do it?
So
because
you're seeing what percentage of the projects are
over half of our business has a non-market dollar tied to it now, which is very uncommon.
Would that include, you mean non-market by public?
I'm saying state, federal, local, insurance, military, like something that's either public or that is not a private dollar where you went out and put a pro forma together.
Would it include tax credit?
Stuff exactly. Tax credit deals. I mean, some of them are combos, right? Where it's like, hey, we're getting LIHTC dollars and we're, like your affordable housing deal. There's some loan, but that deal doesn't happen if you don't have the public support, right? And that's what we're seeing is like more than 50% of the work that we're doing now is what I'm calling non-market work.
So to me, this is a pretty significant thing, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, basically, we have the government kind of like propping.
Oh, dude. I mean, they're paying for my house right now. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. I mean, the U.S. government, between the and the thing is, they announce all these giant. We're going to spend $7 trillion on this infrastructure bill. Well, that takes 6-7 years to get out. We're in year what, 2 or I mean,
to be honest, it takes them 2 years to get it ready, a year and a half to go from that to getting it initially out, and then it goes out over multiple years, right? So
I mean, we're Wall Street seems to suck that information in and sort of absorb it and pretty quickly, but Main Street, I mean, we have to actually see the dollars, right? And there's a lot of dollars still sloshing around out there. So
I think that's interesting that so much of the economy is tied up in that. Like, what's the implication of that going forward, right?
But I know that's your business all the time, right? I mean, you're sort of living and dying by the government sword. For us, it's been sort of like a bonus. And I will tell you, like we're doing a job right now in Sandy Springs, which is a suburb of Atlanta, and it's for the Sandy Springs Police Department. Well, that's all public dollars, but we're doing it for a private contractor that we do a lot of work for. So we're seeing private contractors that didn't used to do a lot of that kind of work pivoting hard into, we're going to do a police department, rebuild now because we need something to do. These guys that are doing these 1 million square foot warehouses aren't doing them. And now we're going to go build Sandy Springs' new police headquarters.
No, I think the government side is good. Obviously, it helped us. Like, we grew a lot this last year, and it was kind of like a year delayed after they allocated the money. I don't see a ton of growth in that market. I think it's just steady.
No.
I mean, the worry is we go back to like a 2014, 15 when we had sequestration, but I don't know, man. Like, I don't see like Trump cutting budgets, right? I mean, the guy's hasn't met something he didn't want to spend money on. And Biden obviously is not going to. I mean, I guess if you get Biden with an all Republican Congress, maybe you'd have something, but I don't know. I'm feeling like at least it's steady state for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And
well, and I mean, your contract timelines are long enough to give you some decent visibility, right? Nothing says it can't change, but I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I would love to have that level of kind of visible,
it's really good. I mean, the big downside of it is when you lose one contract, it's a big, like you got a big back office to maintain all this crap, right? And so like you can lose 25% of your revenue, 30% of your revenue in one action, right? And then you can't cover your back office. And like, I was talking to guys got like $150 million GovCon business. Yeah. And they got like a $50 million BPA. They got to win or else, it's not going to look, it's just like shit. It never goes away, right? So, I mean, there's good, but granted, it's a lot better to be like, hey, I got X amount locked in for at least 3 years. It's awesome. Yeah. So I was curious because like we were going back to that managing liquidity. Like the thing I've started seeing, and don't tell Greg this because he'll kill me if he knows, but I was seeing on X, this guy, Twitter, he's doing something where he sweeps all cash. Like he basically uses his line of credit to manage in and out, and he keeps all his cash outside the business or in like a separate account where they're making money off of the spread over on short-term treasuries. So I've been thinking about trying to do that, but now I'm starting to see like treasury rates, they're going to cut next year. So that's going to be like a bad play.
Less attractive play.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, what else are you seeing out there? I mean, what's the, I can tell you this, when we just bought all this equipment for the first time ever on a term sheet that I've ever borrowing against fixed asset kind of lending, the fixed rate option was lower than the floating rate option. That's how much they think rates are going down next year.
I wonder if that's going to happen in like SBA, but I think they have to. Maybe they have to be.
I don't know, but that's. I mean, I literally have never seen that until this.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I just think like the whole bank thing is changing. Well, so I'm in this like transition period because like my take going into like this week was we're going to have high rates for the next year and a half. And there are all these PE companies that took out rate that a debt that's going to adjust. Yeah. And like we really haven't seen the wall of maturities, and that was going to happen. Then there are going to be a bunch of bankruptcies and everyone's going to freak out. And all this dry powder was going to disappear because the LPs were going to be like, you're never raising for me again if you deploy my money. So that was sort of my take. And now I'm like, what the hell's going to happen? Like I think Powell just said off to the races, right? So if we have declining interest rates, I mean, even a couple of points, a couple 100 basis points it's going to reignite everything, right? Borrowing comes back and like local banks are better off in that.
Oh yeah, everybody talks rates. I mean, when we did our facility 3 years ago, it was 125 or 150 basis point spread, right? This most recent loan was 275 basis points in spread. So spreads it's not just rates. I mean, like the banks are building in. I mean, they've more than doubled their spreads on a lot of stuff. And so, if spreads were still 125 basis points, then people are going to live with that. But when they're 300, it just, I don't know. I know, but I just feel like that just never gets discussed. It's like, hey, these banks have widened out in a way that is, if they feel like rates are stable to declining going into the next, cycle, you're going to start to see these spreads compress again. And that's going to help a ton with people getting deals done.
That's interesting because that's exactly the opposite of what's happening in the public market. So the credit spreads have been narrow. So that's interesting. So like in this in this sort of like private market, because I guess we just did this SBA deal, but I haven't like been out on the market for debt in a while.
I hadn't either until we wanted to buy all this equipment, and then I was like, man, I was just comparing sort of our
check
term
this
sheet
out.
that we got.
So this is the high yield spread, and like obviously peaking here, but like it's going way down.
Yeah.
So there's a big disconnect there, and that's like a high yield is going to be a rated public company. I
Sure.
think, right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so that makes me like a little more uncertain about next year. Like maybe it's time to be giving out fixed rate debt to people. That's probably what you should be doing, right? And then you're going to have like declining rates. And
well, you know, can you get equity like returns with a debt like profile? And I think there's guys out there that are doing that, and that's, you know, that's been a long time since you've been able to do that. But does that go away next year when you start seeing a declining rate environment, or are people still going to need sort of this non-bank capital to keep going?
I think so, because here's my take is like I think we're going to probably ignite inflation again. So I think like they might not raise rates that much, but in an election year. So I think you're going to have inflation going up, and I think that the banks are permanently. I mean, they're going to do better, right? But I think because of what happened with SVB and everything, they're permanently going to sit on top of these guys, the regulators. So I think you're going from whatever 3,500 to 1,500 banks.
Yeah,
and they're going to be less active, and you know, up until a couple months ago, the only banks I saw doing anything were doing SBA stuff, right? So I think private credit's here to stay. I mean, that's going to be the market mostly for anybody who has an SBA. And they're going to take down no way they're going to allow them to take up their commercial real estate portfolios for a long time. I see capital staying relatively scarce, and I don't see rates going like way, way down. And if they're getting 2.75 spread, that's
right. I mean, that's on me. There's probably people that are getting better than that, but you know, that's you know, I mean, awesome. You know, and that's on a no PGs. I mean, that's a very
no PGs,
asset,
because you have
asset-backed stuff. So I mean, there's risk in there for them for sure.
What do you think? Like, are you more of like, so you have a pretty asset-heavy business, right? So
we do. Yeah. The real estate's a big part of it, because you have to, you know, for the recycling, not owning the real estate is a big risk, because, you know, like we've talked about, if for some reason you get non-renewed or whatever, you don't have a business. It's not like you can just go build another Burger King, you know. I mean, you're not going to be able to do it. So
that's why we bought the metal fab building too.
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, if you got to go relocate all that equipment and try to find some way, it's like it's almost like, hey, I don't even think it's worth doing, you know.
Yeah, right. And this equipment is so old. Like I don't know if you could move it. Like it would just fall apart. So it's interesting, because I was thinking about it. I was like, well, it'd be attractive to buy a bunch of these and consolidate them. But I don't know if we could even do that. I don't know if we could do it. I mean, I think we're just going to have a bunch of different buildings and do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, you know.
So how's flying going? So Sam's pilot as well.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what happened to you in Houston?
Yeah. So we had a midair collision in Houston. Not really midair.
That's considered midair? Oh,
wow. Because he was off the ground. So there was a couple of Part 135 charter pilots in a Hawker that took off on an intersecting runway without a clearance and clipped the tail of the plane off on our. Holy
shit. What did that feel like, man? Was it like?
It really wasn't. You know, they were going about 120 miles an hour. We were going about 80 miles an hour, and fortunately, it only caught about 36 inches of the tail. It didn't get into the engines or the fuel or the. So I mean, all things considered, I don't know. It's one of those things where you're just very lucky to be alive, because if you get in, the wings are where the fuel is. So if you get too far into that wing, you got a bomb, and it just, I mean, it was it's one of those things that shouldn't happen, and fortunately,
so is the plane totaled or is it repairable?
I think ours is going to be, because it's there's the tough thing about planes. You have a diminution of value of anywhere from 20 to 30% once a plane's been in like a serious incident.
Oh, really? Okay.
And they don't make that particular aircraft anymore. It's a legacy aircraft. And so there are no parts they all have to be made. And some of them are like 400 days out for production because they don't even have the tools to make the part to make. So it's a whole mess, and it'll, hopefully it gets worked out, and, we're back flying around again. But
man, Sam's grounded. That's tough. It's tough, man.
I've been making do. It's
all right. Well, I got to hop, but this is awesome. Cool to catch up, Sam. Talk soon.
See you, man.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pentz. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apentz on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.